Hello guys, today we will be talking about, what if adult Naruto went back in time to his kid body part 3. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let's begin. I made the seals Jiraiya OG. Naruto told him, deflecting the question and trying his best to look like an innocent 7-year-old kid. Jiraiya cocked an eyebrow at him. Really? Asked the white-haired sage. Well, I kind of figured out since they're on the walls that he taught you? He asked again, eyeing the smaller blonde. Naruto was now panicking. If he didn't say something soon Jiraiya would know he was hiding something and then would never give up on finding out what it is. And even if he could bring himself to lie flat out his mentor's face, Jiraiya would be able to tell. Just then. Hey Naruto, come here and help me take off these seals. Minato called over, saving Naruto from the interrogation. Naruto let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and smiled, thinking, saved. Coming. Naruto called as he ran over. Jiraiya frowned as he went, sure that just a few more seconds and he would have had him. Then walked after him to see how the seal was being removed. When Naruto reached his father he looked straight at the seal and whispered, thanks, that was close. Minato smirked. You looked like you needed some help. He whispered back. Then started talking at a normal level as Jiraiya came up behind them. So I think this can come off if I take this part off first, the rest can be removed. That right? Minato asked his son as the toad hermit looked at what he was talking about. Naruto blinked then looked at his seal. Wow, you're right. You figured that out fast? Naruto said, a little awed. He knew his father was a seal expert. The proof was right on his stomach, but it had taken his future's Jiraiya longer than that. The first time the future Jiraiya had tried breaking down one of his seals it took 2 days, and it was a seal at the same level as this one. After Naruto had assured him that he was right, Minato went right to disabling the seal. As Jiraiya watched and smiled proudly at his student's skills, even though he still fully intended to interrogate his student later about the toads. All the seals were down within a few minutes, though Naruto didn't help take them down after confirming something about not being able to destroy his work. After they were all down though, Minato and Jiraiya thought something still felt off. Iruka walked in and confirmed their thoughts when he spoke. Okay, the classroom and everyone that was in it has now stopped changing colors. But now why is the room and everyone that was in it now all the colors? Iruka asked in a dull, bored voice, now looking like a giant tie-dye doll. Beyond me and Jiraiya sweat dropped, thinking, how could we miss that? While Naruto burst out laughing. Minato sighed after a minute, hanging his head. He had to give it to his son, this was very well thought out. Alright Naruto, how do we take the colors off them? Minato asked, realizing he should have just asked him in the first place. Naruto quieted down to chuckles and stopped laughing to answer. Well, you see, the thing is, you gotta wash it off. Naruto answered with his hand behind his head, trying not to smirk as Jiraiya started laughing. Minato thought it was a funny ending to the prank too, but refused to laugh in front of the Chonin. He was a Hokage after all, he had to set a good example. So Minato turned to Iruka. Okay, you heard him. Tell the other teachers that they have to wash it off. Minato ordered him. Little did he know that Naruto had put a special paint that he made last year in the seals. They would be scrubbing for a while before they got that off. If they get it off at all. Hi Hokage-sama. Iruka answered him and went off to inform the other teachers. Minato didn't lead Jiraiya back to the office. They all went to the Namake's manor, Naruto riding on Jiraiya's back. Minato figured they could talk easier that way. They all arrived at the Namake's manor within a few minutes. They had picked up some Mikiraku ramen togo on the way because they were all hungry. So they sat down at the table eating. Naruto was going through about 2 bowls a minute and his father wasn't far behind. When Jiraiya was finished he looked up, seeing they were pretty much done too, and cleared his throat to call attention and gave Minato a pointed look. Minato sighed and looked to Naruto, who was grimacing and looking away. Minato didn't really know what to tell his sensei. He needed to talk to Naruto. Okay sensei, but first I'm going to take Naruto upstairs. Be right back. Minato called, dragging Naruto behind him before Jiraiya could ask why he needed to take Naruto upstairs and not just tell him to go up them. Once Naruto and his father were up the stairs, Naruto was pulled into his room and Minato shut the door quietly behind him. Alright Naruto, we need to tell him something, but I don't know how much to tell him, or really what. I trust Jiraiya, but I don't know much about your future. Do you trust him? Minato asked, hoping his son had a good relationship with his sensei. Naruto looked at his father straight in the eyes and smirked. That was an easy one. Yes, I would trust Jiraiya with my life in the future. Naruto said without any hesitation or waver in his voice. It was one of the few things he knew for sure and can honestly tell anyone. Minato smiled at him in pure happiness that his son at least had one solid belief in someone and that it came from your sensei. So we tell him in. Together. Minato said, still happy that his son had so much faith in the person he trusted most. But Naruto shook his head, smiling brightly. I have an idea. So maybe we won't have to explain so much. Naruto said, now wearing that look that told everyone that knew him well enough he was going to be creative. Minato hung his head. He could already tell he wasn't going to be able to talk his son out of this one. When Minato and Naruto saw Lad just jumped through the window, they both relaxed. Minato was thinking he should remember to shut the window, silencing seals or not, because if this keeps up his sensei was going to give him a heart attack. Yes, the one Lad just jumped into the Hokage's office without a second thought was Jiraiya. Well, to most it would seem like it was without a second thought, but he had quickly checked and only felt the blonde duo inside. Yo! Jiraiya greeted him. Naruto wiggled down just to jump up on Jiraiya, shouting, Jiraiya! As Jiraiya caught him and smiled at the boy he had grown so fond of. Minato smiled at the scene before clearing his throat, calling for their attention. Well, it's nice to see you're in town, sensei, but you could knock. Minato said while trying to look annoyed, but his sensei knew him too well, so he just brushed off the last part of Minato's greeting like he didn't hear it at all. Naruto just rolled his eyes at all of it. Yes, well, I'm not actually here for just a visit. Jiraiya explained, seemingly completely oblivious to Naruto listening in, probably not thinking he would understand. He went on. There is something odd going on with the toads. Some kind of rumors going around the mountain. Most are inconsistent or downright crazy. Jiraiya didn't notice Naruto fighting a grin at that, but almost all of them are talking about a second chance. Now I don't have any idea what they're talking about. I summoned Gamabuna and he seemed to know something but refused to tell me, saying it wasn't his to tell. Since he was held back by loyalty, their boss summon would only do that for another toad summoner, and since I hold the contact and you are the only other summoner. What the hell is going on? Jiraiya finished with a false sense of calm. He had yet to notice that since halfway through Naruto had begun to pale. He did however notice throughout his story his student had become more and more uncomfortable, so he knew Minato was hiding something. Minato was trying to think of something, anything to say, and so was Naruto. Lucky someone knocked on the door that very moment. So Minato quickly answered, come in, before his sensei could tell them to go away. Jiraiya glared at Minato as the Chunin came in, but couldn't help but smirk with Naruto when he saw that Chunin was changing from orange, pink, to blue and back. Wondering what happened to him, he decided to listen in. Beyond him, he raised an eyebrow at the Chunin who was changing colors rapidly in his office, realizing it wasn't Iruka. He turned to look at Naruto to see him suspiciously looking anywhere but at him and the Chunin. The Chunin stopped to glare at Naruto before speaking. Hokage-sama, we tried to remove the seals in the classroom, hoping it would turn the classroom and Iruka-san back to normal. Instead it affected everyone in the room like Iruka-san instead of the process. We need either Naruto, Jiraiya looked down at the boy he was holding, surprised, or someone experienced in seals to take it off. The Chunin explained. The young Hokage sighed, running a hand through his hair. You set a trap if anyone tried to take the seals off in here? Frank, Naruto? Minato asked rhetorically, looking at his son. When Naruto just pointed to himself like, who, me? Looking innocent, Jiraiya burst out laughing. Minato sighed again, just grateful his sensei had been distracted for now. The Chunin just looked annoyed, and really who could blame him with what he looked like? Alright, I'll come and take a look. Come on Naruto, you're coming too. Minato told his son. The last thing he needed was to be caught in the prank too. Naruto pouted at him, he really wanted to see a color-changing Hokage. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes, his student wasn't getting away that easy, and these seals sounded interesting. I'll come too. Jiraiya stated, not asking, as he gave the student a look that said, you are not getting out of this. I want to see what the next great sealing master has done. Jiraiya finished as he looked down at his godson proudly. Naruto beamed at him, wishing that he remembered just how he had learned it, that it was all because of him. They all roof-hopped to the academy and walked into the classroom that was flipping through colors like a TV being quickly channel surfed. It was making some of the ninja dizzy, so most had left the room before they started to stroke. The Yandami walked quickly up to one of the seals on the wall, which was the only things not changing colors: the walls, desks, trash cans. All the things on the teacher's desk, the pen holder, pencils, papers, books, everything. Even some backpack that one of the kids forgot were changing colors quickly. Jiraiya looked around, wondering when his godson's pranks had gotten so elaborate. Seeing Minato looking at one of the seals, he put Naruto down and went over to another one of the seals to see how it was done. Jiraiya looked closely at the seal, following every line, as Naruto was watching nervously behind him. Jiraiya's jaw almost dropped to the ground when he realized that the base was unlike anything that he had ever seen. It was an original seal, not some copy or alteration. The boy, his 7-year-old godson, had made an original seal. The Toad Sage turned around to see the little blonde looking up at him, almost like he was looking for approval? But why shouldn't he be looking for his father's approval? Well, not for the prank but the seal. Jiraiya shook his thoughts away, though, seeing the little blonde still waiting, and smiled at him. "You know, Naruto, this is a very impressive piece of work. Who did you learn it from?" the old toad hermit asked, kneeling down to his godson looking for answers. Naruto suddenly looked worried, and didn't answer right away, so Jiraiya intervened. "Don't worry, I won't tell your dad," Jiraiya whispered, trying to pry out a secret, thinking it was Minato that Naruto was hiding something from. Naruto grimaced. He couldn't hide anything from Jiraiya, he never could. So even though it was digging himself in deeper, he told the truth. Part of it anyway. He couldn't tell Jiraiya that he taught him sealing, but that seal wasn't actually taught to him anyway. Everything was too blah. Naruto replied, blunt as usual. "I wanted to liven things up. Plus it keeps the ninja that chase me on their toes. You think they don't start training their asses off when they're outrun by an academy student?" Naruto finished, trying to make it seem more noble. "Naruto, you use seals, modified ones that you should know." Minato was going to say more, but Naruto jumped in. "Actually, they're not modified. I made them myself." Naruto told him, proud of his invention, but didn't think it would matter. It's not like a normal ninja could tell the difference between a modified seal and an original unless it was common. Minato blinked. "You made them?" he asked. "Yep." Naruto chirped back. Minato shook his head and smirked. His son really was a seal master. The seals he found on him the night of the Uchiha incident were based off original seals. It's a great talent to be able to modify the seal like he did, but to make an original, that was something else. That was a true gift. The young Hokage looked down at his son and ruffled his hair, smirking at him. "If only your power could be used for good." Minato joked, laughing when the son pouted at him. Then he remembered what he wanted to ask earlier. "Naruto," Minato called for his son's attention, "why do you look so surprised when I asked Shiruka-san how he knew it was you that turned him into the walking eyesore of changing colors?" Naruto snickered at the title his father gave his latest masterpiece. Then sighed resignedly. He didn't really want to tell his father why, because he didn't want to make him feel bad, but he had to stop hiding things. And he wanted to start being more honest with his father now that he could. "I was surprised because no one had ever come to my defense like that before. Everyone just always assumed I did it, whatever it was." Naruto said the whole thing quietly, then smirked. "But I guess most of the time I was guilty," he finished. Minato looked closer though and saw that his son's smirk didn't reach his eyes. It was fake. Minato kneeled down in front of his son, who was still sitting on the couch. "Naruto." Minato started, but he really didn't know what to say. Naruto stopped him from going on though. "It's alright, Dad. It's not your fault. I only told you because you asked. You don't need to feel bad," Naruto said, trying to smile at him. This time it was real, but it was a sad smile. Minato just looked at him for a minute, and then tried again. "Thank you, Naruto, but I don't just feel bad because of blaming myself, I feel bad because I know you do," Minato said, slowly choosing his words with care. His father then put a hand on the top of his head, and put his forehead to his own. "You're my son and I want to help you." Minato pulled back and kissed his son's forehead. Naruto's eyes weren't blinking, they were looking up wide and innocent like the child he appeared to be. Before his father could move away, Naruto jumped forward and hugged him as tight as his small arms could. Minato hugged him back and picked him up off the couch, holding him. After a while, Minato was going to suggest getting some dinner and going out to train with Naruto. He didn't have time to do that too often and it made Naruto happy, but before he could, someone jumped through the window breaking the silencing seals. He and Naruto, who was still being held, spun around to see who it was. "Yes, you, did you set up that trap?" Minato asked, refusing to look in his son's eyes, knowing he would crumble. Even some of the Anbu were under the dreaded puppy dog eyes. No jutsu, and Naruto wasn't even looking at them. Naruto sighed, giving up on catching his father's eyes. "In my defense, I didn't know Iruka-sensei was in the room," Naruto told them with a bored look, but not actually looking at any of them. Most the ninja quirked an eyebrow at what he said, but Iruka was the one to ask. "Then how did the trap go off, if it wasn't set for me?" Iruka asked, confused, looking at the small boy, who'd already made a name for himself as a village prankster. Minato had an idea, but he and the rest of the ninja looked at Naruto, waiting. "Because I activated it from outside," Naruto told them, as if it was so simple. Which to him it was, but for someone who didn't study seals, well, they had no idea how he could have done that. Minato decided it was time to speak up though before anyone asked. "Oh, sorry about that, you see, Naruto has been learning about seals," Minato said, putting one hand behind his head while still holding Naruto up with the other. "So I guess he altered one. Alright, everyone back to what you were doing, I'll take care of Naruto," Minato said as all the ninja left, and he flashed Naruto and himself to the Hokage Tower. Meanwhile in Suna, it was time for Kid/Naruto's monthly visit, and Gaara was waiting for him at the usual spot in the park where they first met. Gaara had been waiting there since morning. He always looked forward to Naruto's visits. Looking up, he spotted the golden fox he had been looking for and ran to him. "Kid, you're here, I was waiting for you," Gaara exclaimed, running over. Kid gave them a foxy grin, still in his fox form, and turned around, motioning for Gaara to follow him. They went up to Gaara's room, being careful that Kid wasn't seen. Gaara shut and locked his door as usual behind him to be safe. Kid jumped up on the bed and sat down. "Gaara, remember that seal I told you about?" Kid asked. "Yeah, the one to go on top of mine, right?" Gaara questioned back. "Right, well, I finished it a few months ago, but the problem is I can't put it on you with a clone. Even the clone I'm using now isn't strong enough. It might have the chakra for it, but isn't durable enough to perform the seal. I need to do it in person," Kid explained. Gaara looked up at him, slightly afraid his friend would give up. "So is it really going to come here? Or do I come to you?" Gaara asked hesitantly, hoping Naruto wouldn't say neither and give up on helping him. Naruto caught his nervousness and tried to think of why, and despite how clueless he could be with some things, his friend's feelings wasn't usually one of them. So he thought over the conversation and realized it. Kid then changed into his human form and put a hand on Gaara's shoulder. "Gaara, I am not going to nod on you, not ever. You got that?" Naruto was looking at him totally serious but didn't seem to be angry. Gaara looked up to his face, seeing the resolve in his best friend's deep blue eyes. He gave a small smile and nodded. "Good, now I'm going to try and give the real me to you. It would be easier to wait till we're older and become ninja, but I didn't want to leave it that long. Especially since I told you over a year ago I'd get it off." Kid's human form smirked at him. "I'm going to try and get to you before next month, alright?" Kid asked cheerfully, now breaking the serious mood. "Alright." Gaara nodded with a small smile. "Now, want to go play, Kid?" Gaara asked, smirking, because of how last time he won their game. Kid just smirked back, "You're on, Sandman." Gaara made a face at the nickname his friend had given him, but Kid had used it a few times, so he was getting used to it. Mainly because trying to get his friend to stop using a nickname was impossible and a waste of time. Gaara pitied the man Naruto would occasionally talk about and wondered what the poor bastard had done to earn the title Earl-Zinman. Hokage Tower. Konoha. Minato dropped Naruto onto the couch that he had in the office and then stared at him, one eyebrow raised while the rest of his face blank, waiting for an answer. Naruto was waiting on him to say something, but the quiet after a few moments was too much. He had never been very patient. "What?" Naruto asked impatiently. Minato just sighed at his son, and only after securing the silencing seals in the office he spoke. "Why did you turn Iruka-san in your classroom orange?" his father asked, massaging his forehead with his hand. Naruto almost laughed. He could remember old man Hokage doing that after many of his pranks. He contained himself though and answered. It had been a few months since the Uchiha incident and since Minato had found out about the future. So Naruto figured it had been enough, and now it was time to liven up the town. while his father had still been treating him like a kid, like he wanted. Naruto noticed that his father was quiet, or like sometimes he just didn't know what to say. So it was time to remind his father how truly childish he could be. Naruto and his class were just let out of the academy. Sasuke was waiting for his brother to pick him up as usual. There was no way he would leave by himself with those drooling fangirls watching. Sakura and Ino were two of those drooling fangirls. Shikamaru and Chauji were headed in the direction of Shikamaru's favorite cloud-watching spot. Shino had disappeared. Kiba walked through the gate and was heading home. Hinata, well, she was hiding behind a tree watching Naruto. Naruto was talking to Sasuke. Normally he would just walk out dodging his own group of fangirls. He was the Hokage's son after all, so without their parents telling them he was a monster, his status, his baby blue eyes, and sunny blonde hair, his fan club was almost as big as Sasuke's. Today though Naruto wasn't leaving right away, though Sasuke didn't mind the company, he was curious. "Hey Naruto, don't you usually go to the tower after school?" Sasuke asked. Yeah, but I wanted to get the full effect." Naruto told him with one of those looks that said this wouldn't end well. Sasuke hid a smirk and tried not to show it, but he loved to see the pranks his friend pulled off. "Get the full effect of what?" Sasuke asked, one eyebrow raised. Naruto grinned big, showing his teeth. Oh yes, this was going to be good. Naruto raised one hand in a seal, which Sasuke knew to be half of the ram seal usually used to focus and release Jinjutsu. Naruto focused the chakra and activated the seals he had placed in the classroom. Sasuke didn't know what happened though, so after a few seconds of Naruto's grin not fading, he was about to ask but never got the chance because right then there was a scream heard from inside. "Naruto!" Iruka-sensei yelled loud enough the whole village most likely heard. Naruto loved it. It was like the signal to start the chase, and he was off like a shot. Sasuke turned around to ask what the hell he did, but when he did, all he saw was an orange blur in the distance. Then Iruka-sensei blurred past him. "Looking orange too?" Naruto looked back and laughed. "It went better than planned. Iruka-sensei must have still been in the room when I activated the seals." Naruto thought as he was still laughing. It was just supposed to be the classroom, and everything in it that was neon orange, but now Iruka-sensei was too, and neon blue, and back to neon orange. Doesn't even seem like he knows that he's changing color. Naruto looked back to see an angry Iruka-sensei changing from neon orange to sparkly pink. To no one would know it except for him, but it was kind of a tribute to his past and soon-to-be future team. The orange of course represented him, the pink was for Sakura, and the blue was for Sasuke. Naruto laughed as he thought about it. It was like a sunset at the beach. He was like the shining sun, bright and powerful. Sasuke was the sea below, deep and strong. Then there was Sakura, the pink glow in between them, acting as a buffer. Well, that was how it was before. This time he was closer to Sasuke, so they wouldn't really need a buffer, but Sakura will still balance the team out nicely, once she is pulled out of Fang Eri mode. Now they were about a team worth of ninja chasing him though, and Naruto could even hear a few of them snickering at how Iruka-sensei kept changing color. He had gone through the village at least 4 times now and they were still right behind him. So he started thinking of a way to lose them. I mean, shadow clone diversions worked but were getting old. Naruto looked behind them to see how many were there. Let's see, 13 so far. It looks like 4 Anbu and 9 Chunin. Not bad for a day's work. Now how to ditch them? Naruto thought as he turned back to look around. Before Naruto could turn around though, he felt them coming. All he saw after that was a yellow flash and suddenly he was off the ground. Naruto realized he was now under his father's arm, which was wrapped around his stomach. Facing the Anbu and Suna that were trying very hard to stop and not run into their Hokage. Minato raised an eyebrow at a Chunin that stopped a bit too close to him as the Chunin jumped back a bit. "Alright, would one of you care to explain why you were chasing Naruto?" Minato asked, eyeing the color-changing Iruka and hiding a smirk. "Ah, Iruka-san, you seem to know more about this. What happened?" Minato questioned Iruka as he glanced down at his son, who had his hands under his chin holding his head up despite the fact that there was nothing under him. "Well, Hokage-sama, I was in my classroom at the academy after class. I'd let out grading papers when there was a flash of colors. When the flash stopped I looked around and the whole classroom was orange." Iruka stated, trying not to twitch when he could see how close the young Hokage was to laughing at him. "Really? Well, Iruka-san, how do you know Naruto did that?" Minato asked, now not hiding her smirk. Iruka stared dumbfounded, his mouth dropped and eyebrows rose. No one but Minato noticed that Naruto had a similar look. He'd ask about it later. Because it was orange, and he ran away laughing. Iruka stated as if that was all the proof needed. Knowing Naruto though it probably wasn't, Minato knew it. Naruto though deadpanned the best he could while still being held under his father's arm. He was going to be caught because it was orange, as he didn't even stay of orange. I mean, anyone could run away while being chased, laughing manically. Naruto thought, annoyed. Okay, that's a good point. Minato conceded but thought it only fair to ask, Naruto, didn't you do this? Minato asked, looking down at his son who looked back with the biggest blue puppy dog eyes you'd ever seen. Who, me? Naruto questioned innocently. Minato almost caved right then, forcing himself to look away. He tried again, and we even got pictures. Naruto yelled and began laughing anew. Hearing his friend laugh so happily and playing that prank was so fun that Gaara didn't think he could be any happier at that moment and laughed quietly. Even though it was quiet, Naruto or Kid, with his enhanced hearing, heard it. He smiled contentedly, still chuckling. Naruto didn't think he could ever remember hearing Gaara laugh. Not in this timeline or the last. That crazy evil laughter when he was transforming into Shukaku didn't count. He had truly changed his friend and made him happier. He was already making a better future. Now Gaara and Naruto were in a room right underneath the council's chamber, and there was a meeting going on about the failed attempt on the Gaara, mostly old morons grumbling about how they failed to get rid of one small child again. Naruto kept his chakra signature completely hidden. He couldn't be caught, nor could anyone know he was ever there. If they knew the Hokage's son was so close to a classified meeting, they'd be in deep shit. So after his part was done, he would immediately change to his fox form. Gaara slowly crept some of the sand in through the cracks in the wood flooring, as Naruto pushed small amounts of his chakra into the chamber in the same way. Both had their eyes closed and one of their hands in the half-ram hand sign, concentrating so that by the time anyone realized what was happening it would be too late. Once Naruto had enough chakra in the room, he opened his eyes to look at Gaara. A few seconds later, and Gaara looked back at him, signaling he was ready. Naruto smirked and nodded. It was time for the games to begin. Inside the council meeting, that demon must be destroyed, sneered one of the older male council members. A female member nodded to him. Yes, he is too dangerous and unstable. It would be better to find a new vessel. Another of the council seemed to be in thought and spoke up. There is something bothering me though, the assassin. Gaara didn't kill him. Usually we just find a lot of blood or a mangled corpse. This time 6 bones were broken, and 7 fractured along with a concussion, but he was alive. And there is no permanent damage. The councilman finished, going back to thinking deeply about why that might be. The demon probably just thought he was dead, or maybe he was in a good mood. It makes no difference, he is still too dangerous. The older male council member snarled. The Kazekage stayed quiet through everything while most of the council seemed to agree with the older man. That was when something very strange happened. Suddenly a bunch of smoke and sand seemed to jump up in the room. The part of the council who had been ninja jumped up to defensive stances, while the 2 civilian members whipped around to see what was going on. Before the smoke cleared, there was another pop and the sand started shifting again. This time the smoke finished clearing and the sand settled. When it did, everyone in the room jaws dropped. Even the Kazekage's nod that you could see it behind his veil. Standing before the Suna council were 5 blonde teenage girls with pigtails, blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Then there were 5 redhead teenage girls with sparkly green eyes, long loose fiery hair, and what looked like very dark eyeliner. That wasn't what caught everyone's attention though, no, it was that all 10 girls were completely naked except for the slight smoke around the blondes and sand around the redheads that just barely covered their essentials. All the council stared wide-eyed, and jaws dropped for about 3 seconds. Half the males had nosebleeds and fainted. Then the blondes walked around to the ones that were left and whispered seductively in their ears, "What, don't you like what you see?" All the narcos asked their targets at the same time, but too quietly for any of the other to hear. That was it, and the remaining male council members had nosebleeds and blacked out. All the blondes giggled, looking at the redheads that rolled their eyes at them. There were 2 female councilors still left, though one was completely embarrassed and the other was switching between glaring at the clones and the idiots on the ground. Even the Kazekage was out. "Who are you?" the angry councilwoman growled, She was defiantly a former Kunoichi. The female Gaara clone smirked while Naruto laughed. This was going well, they didn't even recognize him. Naruto turned to the woman smirking. "Oh, don't worry about us, sweetie, we were just getting a little payback." Naruto chirped happily and pulled out a camera, taking a bunch of pictures of everyone before the two council women could blink. The flash blinded him for a second, scaring the former Kunoichi into a defensive position as she heard a bunch of pops. When the women could see again, all the girls were gone and they were the only two awake in the middle of a bunch of out-cold drooling men with nosebleeds. The two women looked to each other and sighed out at the same time, saying one word that summed it all up: men. Below the council chamber, Naruto started laughing as quietly as possible as he got the memories from his sexy clones, and he activated the small seal on the floor he had made so the clone could give the camera back to him. Now shifting the seal, he sent a copy of the blackmail to the original. Naruto then quickly changed into his fox form. Good. Now he could hear people arguing. They would search the room soon. They were already starting to search the tower. Kid turned to Gaara, who had a slight contented smirk at finally getting back at the council, if only a little. "We gotta get going," Kid said, smirking back. Gaara nodded and they both jumped out the window. They ran unseen in the shadows until they were through the secret passageway and outside the walls of Suna. The boys, well, one boy and a fox, both sat down, catching their breath. Naruto was laughing in between gasps. "Haha, did you see the look on their faces? Priceless." Naruto laughed out. Gaara smiled a real happy smile back at him. One that you would find on a kid that just got away with stealing a cookie from the cookie jar. Naruto waved his hands and arms in big gestures. Meanwhile, at a random training ground, Sasuke watched activating his Sharingan as his older brother, Itachi, was standing in the middle of the training ground concentrating. With his eyes closed and multiple kunai in each hand, Itachi jumped up, snapped his eyes open and threw most of the kunai, seconds later throwing the rest. All the kunai hit dead center on the target set up around him. He used the last three to change the trajectory of three other kunai midair to hit the three targets in his blind spots, one behind a large boulder, and two behind trees. The younger Uchiha had seen his brother do this once before, but not with his Sharingan. He had tried to copy him that day and ended up with a sprained ankle. Now though he saw every movement of his older brother and all the kunai, he wanted to try it again. Itachi looked over to his little brother, who was watching him closely. He could tell Sasuke was watching his every move. Sasuke smiled at us as he hit every target. Itachi returned it with the infamous Uchiha smirk. "Okay, little brother, how about you give it a try?" Itachi said as he picked up the last of his kunai. Sasuke smiled at him, deactivated his Sharingan and ran up to him. "Okay," Sasuke answered, looking up to his brother, as Itachi handed him his own kunai. Because Sasuke didn't normally carry his with him except to the academy for practice, Itachi took his brother's shoulders and slowly turned him the same way he had faced a few moments ago. "There, Sasuke, now just remember what I did. Take your time and focus." Itachi jumped back from his brother so he wouldn't be in the way, but still watched carefully in case he messed up. Sasuke took a deep breath, feeling his brother's eyes on him. He closed his own eyes and cleared his mind, concentrating on the feel of everything around him. Sasuke snapped his eyes open, reactivating his Sharingan. He could see all but the three hidden targets immediately. Feeling the kunai in his hand, he threw them from himself in the directions that Itachi just had, keeping three in his hands for the blind spots a second longer. Then he launched those as well to change the trajectory on three of the other kunai. Out of the 10 he missed 3, but only missed one of the 3 in the blind spots. The other 2 were the farthest target and the target nearest to Itachi. The one in the blind spot was about a foot off, the farthest was a few inches from the target, but the kunai meant for the target close to Itachi was way off, about 7 feet. All the other targets had been hit 5 bullseyes and the other 2 within the second ring. Sasuke slouched. He was so sure he could do it. He saw it done perfectly, but his hand didn't know how to copy it exactly. Plus he was afraid he would hit his brother, which made what would have been an easy mark for him miss completely. Itachi looked over, seeing his little brother's disappointed look, and smiled, shaking his head. The boy had done better than even he had on his first try. "You did well, Sasuke." Itachi spoke calmly as Sasuke looked up at him surprised. After a second though, he looked back down inside. "You're just saying that to make me feel better. I missed 3 targets." Sasuke replied as he walked to pick up his brother's kunai. Itachi ran in front of him so fast that he didn't even see him and almost ran right into him. No, foolish little brother, Itachi started kneeling in front of Sasuke. Sasuke pouted at him for poking him, and then blinked, registering what his brother said. Poked him in the forehead. I'm not, why lie melee to make you feel better? Sometimes I promise that your first try was better than mine. Itachi finishes. Really? How did you do your first try? Sasuke asked, now curious how he measured up to his brother. Itachi resisted the urge to roll his eyes at how quickly his brother had gone from being depressed to wanting to know how much he did better. I missed 2 of the hidden targets the first time and the farthest target, Itachi told Sasuke. Sasuke now looked and thought, they had missed the same amount, but Itachi had said he had done better because he hit 2 of the hidden targets. Sasuke looked up with a content smile, his brother smirked back and ruffled his hair. Now come on and get the rest of the kunai and you can try a few more times before dinner, Itachi told his little brother. Sasuke ran off to find the rest so that he could practice his new move with Itachi. With Gaara and Kid and Suna, I can't believe I let him talk me into this. Gaara thought Izzy and Naruto. Kid waited for the perfect moment to spring their trap. Naruto was grinning from ear to ear beside Gaara in his human form, as he watched his new set of targets, the Sand Council. It all started a few hours ago when Gaara told Naruto about his latest assassination attempts designed by the council and his own father, the current Kazekage. It had failed, of course. Luck for him, Gaara was getting better though, so instead of killing the would-be assassin, Gaara used his sand like a hand and swatted the ninja halfway across the village. Well, he didn't think he killed him. Anyway, Gaara was still upset about it, so Naruto thought of what he always did when his village got him down. He made their annoyances fun. Within a few minutes, Naruto was teaching Gaara a jutsu forbidden by 2 Hokages, and the fine art of pranks. Naruto slammed his hand on the ground just as he had done a few minutes ago to summon Fukasaku. There was a much larger puff of smoke this time though, but Jiraiya never got to see it before he disappeared. When Jiraiya opened his eyes, he noticed he was still in the Namake's manor, in the same room even though he was facing a different direction. Jiraiya turned around to see Naruto and Fukasaku smirking at his stunned expression, and Minato still behind them looking interested but not really surprised. Like weird stuff like this happened all the time. Then it hit him like a ton of bricks, all the memories of a different life. A life similar to this one up to a certain point but very different afterwards. Jiraiya stood there a few minutes just trying to sort through all the new memories. Now he remembered it all. He remembered leaving Naruto to keep his spy network active after the Yanami died. He remembered teaching Naruto once he was a ninja but never telling him he was his godson. He remembered Tsunade. She promised to out with him when he came back from his mission. But he didn't come back. He remembered now he died. Naruto stood there waiting, more patient than usual, his smirk fading and worry growing with each second. After what seemed like forever but couldn't have been more than a few minutes, Naruto slowly stepped up to his mentor and friend, careful not to startle him, and reached up to him, grabbing his arm. Jiraiya slowly looked down at the young blonde boy who looked so much smaller than the last time he remembered him. Do you remember Rasen? Naruto asked hesitantly, never breaking eye contact, trying to see if this was his Jiraiya, the one he knew from this time, or Rasen, the one that knew the real Naruto from the beginning. Jiraiya twitched at the nickname that he remembered well. Sorting through his memories of this world, though he could only remember a few times when he was being more perverted than usual that Naruto would call him that. Jiraiya nodded, still looking at Naruto. Yeah, I remember Gaki. Jiraiya replied to him with a small smirk but in a still slightly zoned out tone. As soon as he said Gaki though, a blonde blur jumped up and grabbed him around the neck in a tackle hug. The Jiraiya of this time hardly ever called him Gaki, even though the name used to annoy him. He kind of missed it. Not that he would ever admit it. Jiraiya didn't have time to react though, and Naruto had gone so fast that, well, he tackled him right through the kitchen wall. Naruto didn't seem to notice though. As he pulled back, he said, "It's good to have you back, Rasen." Ing laughed. Jiraiya smirked at him. Before they both heard a concerned voice. Naruto, are you okay? Minato asked, looking worried at his still 7-year-old son. Naruto chuckled when he finally noticed he had gone through the wall. Putting his hand behind his head in his normal nervous gesture, as he still sat on Jiraiya's chest, he turned to his father. Yeah, I'm fine, Dad. Sorry about the wall. Naruto replied sheepishly. Then he turned back to Jiraiya and noticed he was just staring at his father. Minato tilted his head confused at his sensei just staring at him. If Naruto thought about it he would have remembered, but he didn't. "Hey Senmin, you okay?" Naruto asks concerned. "It was too much though. Finding out that you had died and were now in some kind of alternate world, then seeing your apprentice seem to remember too was one thing, but now his student coming back from the dead too." Jiraiya, one of the 3 legendary Senmin, fainted. Fukasaku hopped through the nude hole in the wall, catching Naruto's attention inside. He could see the confusion written all over Naruto and Minato's faces. "Naruto, do you remember what the first thing you did when you got to this time was?" the old toad asked tiredly. "Yeah, I saved my dad," Naruto replied, still not getting it. But Minato got it and smacked his forehead. Naruto raised an eyebrow at him, but his father still had a hand over his face, so he turned back to Fukasaku. The old toad just rolled his eyes at him, then Naruto's face took on a black look. "Oh, oops." Naruto turned back to Jiraiya's sleeping form. I guess for him it was kind of like seeing a ghost. "Hey!" Naruto chuckled nervously. "But we didn't faint when we saw him?" Naruto turned to Fukasaku, taking on a confused look. "Yes Naruto, but we've had more time to get used to the idea. And well, you could react any one of 1,000 different ways." Fukasaku finished smirking at him. Naruto was nodding the whole time, but at the end he couldn't tell if it was a compliment or an insult. So he settled for making a face at the old toad. Fukasaku just chuckled at him. "So he just fainted, he'll be alright?" Naruto asked, ignoring the old toad's jib. Minato smiled at his son and decided to jump in. "Yes Naruto, he should be fine after he rests for a minute. Here, help me get him to the couch," Minato told his son as he pulled his sensei into a sitting position. They carried the man who had been both of their sensei to the couch as carefully as possible, despite the fact the white-haired toad sage was twice as big as both of them put together. "Alright, if you two don't need me for anything else I'll be getting back. Ma should have dinner ready, and she'll kill me if I'm late," Fukasaku told the 2 blondes when they got Jiraiya settled. They both turned to him smiling and Naruto nodded to him. Soon after this was a small poof and he was gone. They walked back down the stairs together, Minato curious and a little annoyed Naruto didn't tell him what he was thinking of doing. Naruto reached the last 2 stairs and hopped down the rest of the way with a little bounce, seemingly completely at ease. He was happy because it this worked the way he hoped it would. He'd have his Jiraiya back, the one that remembered him the way his was before this time. Naruto now off the staircase, his father right behind him spotted Jiraiya waiting. "Hey Jiraiya Oji. We gotta tell you something, but I'm gonna see if I can show you first." Naruto chirped like he was about to tell him about his day. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Minato was supposed to take the kid upstairs so that they could talk, and now this. "It seems like my student is trying to buy more time. Whatever, Naruto looks like he's got something interesting to show me. Minato is going to have to come clean soon anyway." Jiraiya's jaw dropped though when he saw the little blonde boy bite his thumb and make the familiar hand seals for the toad summoning jutsu. Naruto quickly drew his blood and flew through the needed hand seals before either adults could stop him. Keeping in mind the toad, he wanted Naruto to slam his hand on the ground and called out Kuchos no Jutsu. A puff of smoke popped out and when it cleared there was a small old toad with a staff on the ground. Fukasaku looked up to see Naruto's whole face grinning at him and sweat dropped. The kid was defiantly up to something. He also saw Minato not far behind the devious blonde. Then Fukasaku turned around and froze. "Jiraiya-chan?" Fukasaku remembered perfectly the last he'd seen Jiraiya. It was the day Jiraiya was killed by the 6 paths of pain that his student Nagato created. If Jiraiya wasn't already gawking, he would have been now that he saw who had been summoned. Hey Fuka-san, you okay?" Naruto asked, a bit concerned when the toad was just staring at Jiraiya. Of course Jiraiya was still gawking at Naruto and the old toad. It was enough though to pull the old toad's thoughts back to the present. Yeah Naruto. I was just lost in thought. What was it you summoned me for?" Fukasaku said, trying to shove the unsettling thoughts away for later. Naruto's eyes showed sadness for a moment. He had a good guess what those thoughts were. He had seen the look on the old toad's face. It was the same look he knew he had sometimes thinking of the past. As Naruto shook his head, putting a smirk back on his face, he was about to answer the old toad when Jiraiya finally snapped out of his shock and interrupted. "Hold it. Just a minute, What the heck is going on? Why can Naruto summon you? He never signed the contract. Jiraiya burst out, looking from his student to the toad and to Naruto. All of you just looked back at him blankly. Jiraiya rolled his eyes at the dumb looks, and pulled the toad summoner's contact from behind him where it had been resting on his back. Unrolling it quickly, he found where the last names were and nodded, then turned it around to show them. See? Jiraiya said, pointing at his own name. This is where I signed, and here's Minato's, but there is no Naruto on this. Jiraiya finished looking at them expectantly. Fukasaku just blinked, then made a skeptical face as he turned to Naruto. You didn't tell him, did you? The old toad stated, more than asked, as he looked at the youngest and most interesting toad summoner. Naruto's sweat dropped and put his hand behind his head, choking nervously. As Jiraiya narrowed his eyes and quickly rolling the scroll back up and putting it back behind him. Alright, that's it, kid. Spill it. Jiraiya told him, making no room for argument. Minato just sat back and watched the show. As Naruto smirked and kneeled down, whispering to Fukasaku. The old toad's eyes widened, and then seemed to be calculating. After Naruto stopped whispering to him, the old toad looked thoughtful and nodded. I think it would work, but I think it would have a better chance if you did the summoning. I can channel my chakra through you so that you will be able to summon him. Fukasaku said carefully. Naruto nodded, but Minato and Jiraiya just looked confused. Jiraiya had enough though. Summon who? What are you two talking about? Jiraiya yelled, finally fed up with all the secrecy. They both turned to him and smirked. Jiraiya felt a chill go down his spine at those looks. Fukasaku jumped up onto Naruto's head, bit his thumb, swiping the blood on the hand Naruto held up for him, which already had the boy's own blood on it, mixing the two. Then the old toad started channeling his chakra into the boy. Naruto pulled the toad's chakra the best he could into his arms to his hands, mixing a bit of his own chakra, just as they had done with the blood. Then he started making the hand seals.
What did you do? Jiraiya asked cautiously. Naruto turned to him with an expression that looked way too happy. What will the sake really do? Jiraiya asked skeptically. Naruto rolled his eyes. Oh, don't worry so much, the sake will take the paint off. It just doesn't need to be scrubbed off. This way they will smell like drunks for the next few days though. Naruto explained, chuckling to himself. Jiraiya shook his head but chuckled too. The kid couldn't even be blamed for this one. They were scrubbing themselves with sake, of course they would smell. Somehow Jiraiya managed to last until Naruto's time ran out, but not unscathed. He was pretty sure his arm wasn't broken but hurt like hell from blocking one of the Sage Chakra enhanced hits. When Naruto's Sage mode ran out though, Jiraiya started getting the upper hand. Because of Naruto's size he was at a disadvantage. They decided without speaking to end it with one final attack, as they both powered up a Rasengan in one hand. Jiraiya smirked when he saw the boy not using a clone. He had grown. They charged. Their attacks clashed, neither giving an inch as the two powerful balls of rapidly spinning chakra push against each other, and then bang! Both balls exploded. Naruto and Jiraiya went flying back in different directions, each hitting and going through a tree. After a minute Jiraiya got up, went over to Naruto and sat down next to where he was laying, still catching his breath. Well Gaki, I would hate to face you, when you're older. Jiraiya chuckled. Naruto let out a laugh too. You just wait, Uro-sennin, I'll be the greatest Hokage. Believe it. Naruto laughed, knowing he'd told Jiraiya the same exact thing before. Jiraiya laughed too, remembering it. Hey, I bet you will, Gaki. Jiraiya said in a light tone. Naruto smiled up at him and sat up. Hey Uro-sennin, I need you to help me get to Suna. I don't think my dad will let me go alone, and he'd notice if I was gone that long. Naruto said, looking at Jiraiya. Jiraiya made a face Naruto had seen before. Don't call me that. Anyway, I guess so, but you're helping me bring Tsunade back while we're out there. Why do you need to get to Suna? Jiraiya told his protege. Naruto thought about it. He would need some way to bring Tsunade back, since there was no way in hell he was going to let the damn snake kill his dad. This was as good as way as any. I'm going to see Gaara and fix his seal on Shukaku. Naruto told the Toad Sage. Jiraiya blinked. Since when could Naruto use seals to that degree? Okay, he had done some pretty good ones, but a demon seal? You think you are up to that? Jiraiya asked. Naruto nodded. Hi. I have been working on it, it's perfect? Naruto stated sure of his work, there was no way he would think of using it on Gaara if it wasn't. Alright then, how do you plan to do it? He is the Kazekage's son and he doesn't even know you yet. Jiraiya asked, wondering what the plan was. Oh, don't worry, he knows me, and he knows I'm coming. Everything will be fine. Naruto said, putting on his happy face. Jiraiya deadpanned. He doesn't have a plan, he hasn't changed at all. Okay, sign this so people don't get suspicious. Jiraiya said sign as he pulled out the toad summoning contract. Later Minato found his son and sensei right where he thought they'd be at lunchtime, Akiraku's. They both looked a little worse for wear, but other than some cuts and bruises they seemed fine. Naruto was inhaling the ramen as usual when Minato walked up behind him. Well, it looks like you two have been having fun, Minato said, pulling their attention to him. Naruto looked up with half a bowl's worth of noodles hanging from his mouth, smiling as he slurped them up. Minato laughed at his son's antics. Jiraiya just looked at the two, smiling, as if what he was seeing was a gift from Kami. After they were all done eating and catching up, Minato had to go back to work, but before he did he remembered he had to ask Naruto something. Naruto, one of you teachers came to the tower today. Naruto looked away guiltily. And he said the paint isn't coming off. Minato finished. Naruto looked up at him as innocent as possible. Really? I wonder how that happened. Naruto said, looking down as if in thought. Jiraiya was just sitting back watching the show, chuckling every now and then. Minato raised an eyebrow skeptically. They want to know how to get it off. Minato told his son, ignoring the I didn't do anything face. Naruto hummed, tilting his head to the side, then taping his chin as though he was thinking again. Naruto nodded to himself, then looked up to answer. Have they tried soap? Naruto asked so innocently, looking at his chibi, a bit annoyed at the answer. You didn't know him, you would think he actually meant it. Minato face faulted, his head banging on the counter, as Jiraiya burst out laughing. Minato pulled himself back up. You know you already have a week's detention, I bet the teachers would be happy to make it too. Minato told his son. Naruto's jaw dropped, then he went into pouting mode. Fine. Just tell them to scrub with sake, it will come off. Naruto grumbled dejectedly. Minato nodded and left to inform the walking eyesores, Chonin. Once he was gone, Naruto smirked. Jiraiya knew that face. Enter. Minato called to the door, and in stepped one of the academy teachers from yesterday. Minato tried not to laugh when he noticed that the man's face and hands were still tie-dyed, but couldn't hide a small smirk. Although he did look a little redder. He was probably scrubbing all night. Minato already knew what he was there for, but asked anyway, what can I do for you? The ninja rolled his eyes but humored the Hokage. You can ask your son, how to get this stuff off. The Chonin replied, completely annoyed at the fact he couldn't get it off, but tried to speak in a respectful tone. Minato was too amused to care that he was being a bit disrespectful at the moment. He'd be mad too after all. Alright, I will find him and see if he knows. I suspect the classroom is also not coming clean? Minato asked, already knowing the answer. No, Hokage-sama, it's not. We've moved all the student from that classroom to another one till it can be cleaned because the colors were distracting them. The Chonin answered, now back to speaking as he should to a cage. Minato nodded to him. Very well, I will send you a message when I find out how to remove the stuff. If there's nothing else, you're dismissed. Minato stated. The Chonin bowed and left. When he was gone, Minato let out a small laugh and shook his head. Minato started back on the paperwork that seemed to never end and decided to stop in a half hour to find Naruto. With Jiraiya and Naruto, they were both already in Sage mode when they started. Jiraiya didn't know yet that Naruto used his clones to recharge in mid-fight. He did wonder though why Naruto had made 3 clones in the beginning but sent them away while only he charged. Jiraiya was about to send one of his own clones after them, but Naruto reached him first. Naruto, despite his 7-year-old body, engaged Jiraiya in a taijutsu battle first thing. He was empowered by Sage mode, but so was Jiraiya. The older Toad Sage was soon surprised again when he recognized his apprentice was using Kawazuku Might, frog-style Katia, The Toad's special taijutsu taught as part of more advanced sage training. Jiraiya quickly jumped up, now also using Kawazuku Might, and narrowly avoided Naruto's punch, which hit the ground making a 5-foot in diameter crater. Damn, I gotta be more careful, he's gotten good, Jiraiya thought. As if he could read the Sennin's mind, Naruto smirked at him and jumped up after him. Immediately regretting the direct approach in midair as his mentor did the Harijuzujutsu, Underworld Guardian Spikes, changing his hair into a barrier of sharp spikes covering almost all of his body. Naruto created a clone to pull himself back. The clone was now flying toward Jiraiya. As Naruto landed on the ground, the clone hit Jiraiya and exploded. Yes, exploded. Naruto had learned the Bakuhotsu Jutsu, exploding clone technique. Jiraiya's thoughts were around the lines of, damn, the world must have been ending for someone to have taught him that. He could take down a nation with it. When the smoke cleared, there was only a steaming stump left. Before the clone could hit, Jiraiya had used the substitution jutsu, replacing himself with the stump. What Naruto didn't know was that Jiraiya had sent a Kagebushin clone to find the ones Naruto had sent out earlier. As soon as Naruto spotted the stump, he ducked just in time to avoid Jiraiya's punch that went right over his head. While Jiraiya pulled back, Naruto jumped away to get some room between them. They faced each other in identical sage stances and smirked at each other. One was smirking from pride in his apprentice, the other because it was just plain fun to be sparring with his mentor again. Then Jiraiya's sage mode ran out, his time was up. Naruto knew it would only be a few seconds before his did too and ran straight at Jiraiya, surprising him, but Naruto knew he wouldn't make it in time to land a direct blow, so he hit the ground, breaking it all the way to the old Sennin, like Sakura would. Just as he did, his time ran out and sage mode disappeared, but he kept running as Jiraiya was still off balance and made a direct hit on the Sennin's face. Jiraiya wasn't one of the most well-known shinobi for nothing though, so he jumped back with the hit and flipped over, landing on his feet. Naruto blinked as he got memories back from the clone he sent to protect the other two clones that were drawing in nature's chakra. It seemed that a clone of Jiraiya's had dispelled it. Naruto quickly dispelled one of the meditating clones before Jiraiya's clone could destroy it. Only a second after he did, he felt the other clone dispel as Jiraiya's clone destroyed it too. Jiraiya saw Naruto's eyes change back to sage mode and was cursing the unfamous of it as he wondered how in the hell he did it. Within a few seconds though, his own clone dispelled, giving him its memories. Jiraiya let out a laugh at the simplicity of it, and it was so Naruto. Ha! Oh, I see, Gaki, so that's how, but you know that was your last one. Jiraiya called over to the mischievous little blonde. Though he knew if Naruto used his time right that he wouldn't need another recharge. Naruto just grinned his big happy grin at him. Yay, well, Toad couldn't fuse with me, so I had to come up with some way to use it in battle. Naruto told Jiraiya, putting his hand behind his head. But I know you're just trying to buy time, Naruto said, smirking at him. Jiraiya laughed nervously. Well, he was right. Normally he'd use the toads to get him out of situations like this, but summons won't fight for one summoner against another, so that was out. Naruto charged. Afterwards Jiraiya thought instead of Naruto showing him what he had learned, they could have a sparring match, so he could see his protege in action. Needless to say, Naruto loved the idea. In Suna, Gaara's side as kid dispelled. He was still hopeful, though his friend had promised before he had to go that he would be here within the month to strengthen the seal on him that held Shukaku. Gaara turned around and almost jumped. His sister, Temari, was in the doorway of his room that he'd stupidly left cracked. She looked nervous, like she expected Gaara to hit her, not that he ever had. He didn't ever even remember touching her. Temari shifted in front of Gaara's doorway, not going in. Gaara hadn't moved since she appeared. He was pretty sure she would have said something or looked surprised by now if she had seen Kit. It seemed longer, but before 5 seconds had passed she spoke. Gaara, are you feeling okay? You just seemed upset yesterday. Temari asked her little brother. Gaara looked at her with his usually blank face. He didn't often show emotion around anyone but Naruto. Scanning his sister carefully, Gaara saw no trace of hatred, a little fear, but also worry. Is she actually worried about me? Gaara thought, now confused. Gaara knew exactly what his sister was talking about. It was yesterday before Naruto came that another assassin had come to kill him. He didn't actually think his brother or sister noticed, let alone cared. Gaara wanted to push his sister away. This was like an opening for her to get close to him. If she was close then she could hurt him like Yoshimaru Oji had. But Naruto's words rung in his head. I know it's hard, Gaara, but just keep trying. They can never really understand because they will never go through what we have, but that doesn't mean they won't ever try. Gaara looked down. He wanted Temari to be his friend, but to do that he would have to take a chance, and give her a bit of trust. Naruto's words rung in his head again. That doesn't mean they won't ever try. Gaara sighed. Well, if this is Temari trying then, I guess I'll give her a chance. Yay Temari, I'm okay now. Gaara nodded to her, still keeping his face completely blank. Temari gave a small smile that her little brother had answered her nicely, but there was something wrong about how he said it. He said I'm okay now as in he wasn't before? The 10-year-old debated with herself for a second before she decided to ask. Now? Then why were you upset before? Temari asked her little brother a bit nervously. Gaara mentally sighed. He didn't want his sister afraid of him, though it did help him get all the cookies without anyone bothering him about it. But did he really want his sister to know that Ninja kept coming to kill him? Well, she is his older sister, and she did ask. I was upset because father and the council sent another assassin to kill me, Gaara stated flatly. Temari's face deflated. Did she actually feel sad? Gaara wondered, and looked down, still keeping his face perfectly emotionless. Temari shifted on her feet. She wanted to hug her little brother but wasn't sure if she should or if he even wanted her to. But she had to say something. I'm sorry Gaara. Is there anything I can do? Temari asked, not really thinking there was. There wasn't, well, not about the assassinations anyway, but maybe there was something she could do. Gaara debated asking though. He didn't really know if it was something you could ask for. It wasn't like he had anything to lose though. Gaara looked up, hopeful, catching Temari's eye with the slight emotion he was showing. You could do one thing. Gaara trailed off, still debating with himself if he wanted to ask outright. It's okay Gaara, you can ask, what is it? Temari was now curious what she could do or even what her youngest brother could want that he couldn't get himself. Gaara took a deep breath. Will you be my friend? Gaara wanted to look down but didn't take his eyes off his sister. He had to know what she really thought and watched her face to see her reaction. Temari's face went blank at the innocent question. Gaara saw no fear, no anger, but a lot of confusion and a bit of sadness. All he wants is a friend? Temari thought. Temari walked up to Gaara and he wondered if she would try and hurt him, but his hand didn't move. Then his sister did something that shocked him. She was hugging him. Of course I'll be your friend Gaara, you're my brother. Temari answered quietly as she pulled back from hugging him. When Temari pulled back she noticed Gaara's shocked expression and her lips twitched at a small smile. Now get ready, we got to go to the academy. Temari stated, walking out the door, leaving the still stunned Gaara to get ready. Konoha Hokage's office. Oh man, there is so much paperwork. Why did I want to be Hokage again? I'm starting to think the Sandaime was right and the paperwork is cursed. No matter how much I do there's always more. Minato thought as he cried anime tears at his desk. He was somehow able to see enough that he was still going through papers and stamping the ones that he had looked over and approved. Maybe I'll take an early lunch and see what Naruto is up to. I told him he could take the day off from the academy to bring Jiraiya-sensei up to speed with everything. Though he'll find out when he goes back tomorrow he has a week worth of detention for that prank. Though it was a really good one. Minato smirked. Not 10 seconds later someone knocked on his door. Minato sighed. Well, at least it's a break from the damn paperwork from hell, he thought. Jiraiya woke up and looked around. He was in his student's house sleeping on the couch. Slowly sitting up, letting everything from last night sink in, he noticed the sun was shining in brightly from the window. Jiraiya sighed. He must have been here all night. Just as he was about to get up he saw a yellow and orange blur run past him. The blur seemed to notice and skidded to a stop just before the kitchen. Whipping himself around, the little blonde and orange blur, now known as Naruto, was looking at him with excitement. Naruto ran over to the couch where his mentor was still sitting, and smiled up at him while he seemed to be almost bouncing where he stood. "Hey, you're awake." Calming himself down a bit at seeing how confused Jiraiya still looked, he tried again. "Yes, yesterday happened. Yes, everything you remember is true. And yes, you did faint." Naruto said the last bit with a taunting smirk. Jiraiya twitched at that, and made a face at his apprentice. That made Naruto chuckle at him. "Alright Gaki, I know it had to be you, so what did you do?" Jiraiya asked, raising an eyebrow. Naruto just rolled his eyes. Of course it was him. Who else could, or would for that matter, do something so extreme as to change the world from the inside out? If you weren't sitting down I'd tell you to. Naruto sighed, anticipating the long story. Konoha was attacked by the sound with Orochimaru again, and at the same time what was left of the Akatsuki came for me. Neither side survived. As Naruto spoke, Jiraiya could see the hollow look of someone who had gone through war come into his eyes. The Snakedom and I were the last ones left. He had finally taken control of Sasuke's body. In the beginning Sasuke's will was too strong, so it took him a few years until Sasuke's will had weakened. Anyway, we were both exhausted, everyone around us was dead. Even the rest of the Akatsuki had been taken down, most by Bachan or other rookie 9. We stood there as Konoha was burning all around us. I could feel the fire, but it couldn't touch me. We powered up our attacks and were about to clash. But at the last second, I pulled back. Naruto looked away from his mentor slightly to the side but continued. Sasuke's eyes flashed. I could see he was fighting back against the snake. It was too late though for him to stop. The Chidori went straight through my heart. I knew I was before I could die though. Kyuubi pulled me into the seal. He told me there was a way to go back. I could change everything. I agreed. Naruto finished. For a while they both didn't move and were silent. Jiraiya finally broke the silence by sighing. "Well, I guess a lot happened after I died." "How long?" Jiraiya asked in a lighter tone. Naruto knew what he was asking too, he didn't have to explain it any further. Sighing himself, Naruto answered. 3 years Sennin. Naruto answered, not looking at him as he thought the end. 3 years Sennin, since you died. Jiraiya could see that his apprentice was trying to avoid the topic, and gave a small smile. "Judging by this and the way he greeted me last night, I'd say the little Gaki must have actually missed me. Well, I guess I won't tease him too much." Jiraiya was just about to say something when he saw his godson's head jerk up and eyes widen like he had just been hit in the head. Naruto was falling forward. When Jiraiya saw, he quickly reached out and caught him. Jiraiya's heart rate was up now. This Gaki was going to give him a heart attack at this rate. "Naruto. Naruto, Naruto, hey, what's wrong?" Jiraiya asked, concerned, as he sat Naruto on the couch and kneeled down in front of him. Naruto was panting like he had just run a few dozen laps around the village. After a moment Naruto tried to answer. "Sorry, I'm fine. My new clone just dispelled." Naruto answered in between breaths. Jiraiya blinked and let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "I'm not used to the backlash yet," Naruto added. Jiraiya tisked, annoyed. "No, really, you think? What in the hell kind of clone could you make that could do this to you?" Jiraiya exclaimed, upset that he had used a technique like that. Naruto looked up at the disapproving tone and answered, speaking innocently. "It's called Kage Kitsune Bushin Jutsu, or Shadow Fox Clone. It just takes so much out of me because I make it last for so long. And part of it is made of Kyuubi's chakra." Naruto answered hesitantly. Kyuubi and him hadn't been on good terms before Jiraiya died. Jiraiya stared at him for a second, then shook his head. "So you finally learned how to control the Kyuubi's power?" Jiraiya realized. Naruto brightened at that. "Yep, I've learned a lot since you remember." Naruto boasted happily, though was careful to not say died and quickly pushed it out of his mind. Naruto grabbed Jiraiya's arm and jumped up from the couch, dragging the Toad Sennin with him. "Come on. I want to show you." Naruto yelled behind him as he dragged the Sennin right out the door, only briefly stopping to slip his shoes on. Naruto brought Jiraiya to an empty training ground after doing a quick and clever trick to get rid of his guards. If those guards were as stupid as he thought they were, they wouldn't even notice for a few hours. Once they were there and Naruto was sure they were alone, he started out by showing Jiraiya his Sage mode. To say the older Toad Sage was annoyed that Naruto didn't get the ugly nose and beard he did was an understatement. The white-haired Sennin grubbed for the next 10 minutes about the unfairness of it all. Who was he? Gaara asked curiously as Naruto turned back to him. Naruto stared at him blankly for a second like he expected him to know, then blinked as if he realized something and put his hand behind his head. A gesture Gaara had seen him do before. Oh, that's Uro Sennin or Jiraiya Oji. Naruto chuckled at the name the old Toad Sage always said not to call him. He's my godfather. Naruto smiled, then mumbled to himself, maybe I should come up with a new name for him. Gaara took no notice to his friend's ramblings, and asked the obvious question. What's a godfather? Gaara said as they climbed up onto the stools to order. Naruto blinked, turning to him. Truthfully, he wasn't exactly sure, but he'd try his best to answer. Well, a godfather is supposed to act as your father if your own father dies. But since mine is still alive, he's kinda like an uncle, I guess. Naruto explained as best he could. Not that I would know, since my godfather didn't do that. I didn't even know he was my godfather till after he died. But at least he came back and taught me stuff, later. What Naruto didn't know was that Jiraiya had come back that way heading toward the hot springs, and had heard the whole thing. He knew what Naruto must have been thinking. With the way the boy's eyes glazed over, he'd learned that was what happened when he was sad. Jiraiya saw the little blonde's head lift back up with a cheery grin though and order his favorite ramen. Jiraiya turned away so he was more out of sight and closed his eyes tight. That smile was completely fake and he knew it. I'm sorry, Naruto. I will make it up to you, somehow. Jiraiya thought as he walked off, all thoughts of research forgotten. With Minato, the young Yondaime Hokage had snuck out of his office, and was training out in the Forest of Death. He doubted anyone would look for him there. As for ditching his work, well, the Hokage has to stay in shape too. Sitting behind that desk all day every day was going to make him weak. At least that was the excuse reason he thought up when he was sneaking out. Minato sighed as he sat down against a tree. He had already worked through all his techniques twice and was taking a break. As he sat there though, his thoughts just couldn't help but to wander to his son. Had been out of the village after all. He had kind of been hoping the boy would never have to grow up, and he could keep him safely by his side forever. Was the first time he flashed back. Come on, Naruto, you can do it. Minato said, excited, holding his hands out in front of him. Naruto stood a bit wobbly about 3 feet away, holding on to the couch with one hand. Naruto was only 5 months old and Minato knew it was a bit early to be trying to get his son to walk, but the boy seemed to just keep trying, like he was determined to not give up. Little did he know at the time Naruto was thinking, if I can just get these stupid little legs to work, I can use the damn toilet. Naruto's eyebrows narrowed like he was concentrating, then he took a step towards his father, letting go of the couch. Minato's heart jumped. That's it, Naruto, come on, come to daddy. Minato exclaimed, holding his hands out, smiling proudly. At that prompt, baby Naruto took 3 quick steps and practically jumped into his father's arms. Minato laughed and scooped him up, spinning him around, chanting, "You did it! You did it!" Naruto just laughed as his father glared at the Enbu guards, daring them to say anything about it ever. Yes. Now I can use the toilet. Naruto thought to himself, laughing. His father turned back to him, hearing the laugh, and tickled him. Grinning madly at the little bundle of sunshine, who looked like the splitting image of him. Flashback, and Minato sighed with a small smirk. He'd have to do something with Naruto when he got back. Make some more memories to look back on for when his son was grown. After all, he would be small forever. Later in Suna, it was very late. Jiraiya and Naruto had gone to sleep hours ago, but now the small blonde-haired boy was getting up quietly, trying not to wake his godfather as he dressed and grabbed his weapons, just in case. A wise ninja didn't stray far from his weapons, and a wise ninja lived longer. Just as he headed toward the door, he was stopped by a voice. "Where do you think you're going, Naruto?" The white-haired sage asked as he propped himself up on his elbow and turning on his side to face the boy. Naruto cringed but turned around looking guilty for trying to sneak out. I was going to fix Gaara's seal. Naruto told him in a whisper so that it hopefully wouldn't carry to any listening ears. You could never be too careful in a foreign shinobi country even if they were allies. Jiraiya frowned at him for trying to do that alone. I'm coming with you, Gaki. You shouldn't have tried to go alone. Let me look over that seal you're planning on using too. The way the Toad Sennin said it left no room for argument. Naruto and Jiraiya approached Suna and the older Toad Sage slowed. So how are we doing this? Jiraiya asked the little blonde, looking for a plan to get in. Naruto slowed to match his pace and looked up to him. Well, since you're with me I was just going to go through the front door. Naruto answered innocently. Jiraiya almost face-faulted, remembering just in time that it would really hurt while running at this speed. Naruto chuckled at him. Don't worry so much, we go in like we're just passing through, get a room for a few nights, I fix Gaara's seal. Yes, I have a plan to do that, and then we can leave. Naruto told him, rolling his eyes as he finished. Jiraiya scowled at him, clearly meaning, well, why didn't you just say that in the first place? While it didn't look like Naruto saw the face, Jiraiya could have sworn he heard the boy snicker when he turned away. In Konoha it had been almost 3 days since the real Naruto left and the Kitsune Shadow clone was playing its part perfectly. He was Naruto after all. He wasn't just filling in for the original though, no, he was working on something that Naruto had wanted to figure out for a while, how to transfer specific memories so he wouldn't have to explain so damn much. At first he didn't think he would be able to do it because the way he was trying to basically took the control of a high-level genjutsu. He sucked at genjutsu. He was trying to create an illusion, based off his memories, but he just couldn't hold a focus on all the details. That's it. I may not be able to consciously create and hold the details but they are all in my mind. If I can't make an illusion, then I'll show them the real deal. But that means I would have to bring them inside of my own mind. And past him. Naruto sighed. He'd have to work out all the details, but if he was right it wouldn't be too hard and he should be able to get it worked out before the real Naruto came back. In Suna with Gaara was just walking to the playground like any other day to sit on the swings and watch the other children play. Who knows, maybe one of them would let me play with them today, or maybe I'll see a new game and show it to Naruto later. Temari seems to be trying to be nicer to me too, she might play with me later. Blonde spiky hair on a boy who looked just as young as him. No. It couldn't be, Naruto said in the next month the little redhead's thoughts stopped suddenly as he was walking past the gate. The 7-year-old saw a familiar mopsy come but it only been a week. Maybe. The blonde boy turned around and looked straight at Gaara, giving Gaara a grin that reminded him of a fox. That's him. He is really here, and that not a clone or he would use the gate. Gaara ran for him, not quite as fast as he could but still trying to get there quickly. Naruto started walking towards him. Naruto. Gaara called to him as he slowed and there was only a few feet in between them. Jiraiya turned when he felt his apprentice leave his side but just smiled when he saw why and waited for the guard to give back his paperwork. Hey Gaara. Naruto chirped. It's nice to finally meet in person, huh? He finished chuckling at the end. Gaara gave him a genuine smile. Naruto rolled his eyes thinking, oh screw it, we're 7, and grabbed Gaara's arm, pulling him into a hug. Some of the villagers that were glaring before paled but Naruto paid them no attention whatsoever and Gaara was too shocked to notice. He quickly came out of his shock though and hugged his friend back and they broke apart. Naruto knew an awkward silence was coming so he started talking before it could. Well, don't just stand there, what good to eat around here? Naruto exclaimed. Gaara chuckled at him and grabbed his friend's hand, dragging him to the only ramen shop he knew of. Naruto had already shown his obsession with the stuff to Gaara because when he talked about it he tended to go on and on. Jiraiya followed them and as they reached the ramen shop he could only roll his eyes and sigh. He really wanted something else. Naruto. Jiraiya called him and the little blonde spun around, as the redhead looked back curiously. He hadn't noticed the man had been with Naruto at the gate, he had been too thrilled in seeing his friend and not having to hide it. Yay? Naruto asked, sounding a bit distracted, he wanting to get to his ramen quickly. He doubted it was as good as Ikiraku's, but no one's was. Jiraiya ignored his antics, far too used to them. I'm going to go find us a hotel to stay in, get to the hotel by sunset. Holding up his hand to stop the protest he knew was coming. Yeah, I know, but your dad will kill me if I lose you. Jiraiya explained. Truthfully, he didn't want the kid out after dark either. Strong or not, he was still 7 years old. Fine. Naruto said, pouting. Jiraiya smirked at him and ruffled his hair. The brat just looked so cute when he pouted. He chuckled when his godson grinned and swatted at him. He dodged and walked off, waving his hand over his shoulder as his went to find a place to stay. She would always give up, and her father said she was weak. This boy though worked so hard and never gave up, never gave in. She wanted to be like this boy, she admired him. And flashbacks, that admiration had grown into a crush. She liked him a lot. Her blonde ball of sunshine waved at her through the window and then was gone. Within seconds, Iruka-sensei came back in the room and called for everyone to get back to their seats, even though it was only Ino and Sakura who weren't sitting. At the gate, Jiraiya was standing next to a clone while grumbling about tardy brats taking after their sensei when a blonde blur streaked past him. Naruto quickly turned around and in true Kakashi fashion spoke. Yo. Jiraiya face faulted as the real Naruto grabbed his pack from his clone and the clone dispelled. You're late. Jiraiya shouted, reminding Naruto of himself with Kakashi. Naruto mentally shrugged, might as well play it out to the end. Sorry, I got lost on the road of life. Naruto told him without a trace of a lie in his face. Jiraiya's sweat dropped, as he could hear the two guards on gate duty trying not to laugh, unsuccessfully. You've hung out with Kakashi too much. On the other side of Konoha, a man with silver hair reading a book sneezed 3 times. Let's get going, said the white-haired sennin as he started walking away. Right. Naruto chirped happily and created one of his new Shadow Fox clones. You know what to do. The original told it and ran after Jiraiya, who turned back to see the new clone. He saw no obvious difference, but when he tried he could feel bits of the Kyuubi chakra in it, but not enough that anyone who wasn't looking for it could sense it. The two walked off out of the village and were soon out of sight. 2 days later, the Hokage sat alone in his office doing paperwork at breakneck speed. I'm almost done, there is only a few more. Minato thought as he neared the end of the pile on his desk. Just as he was about to stamp the last one, there was a knock at the door before his assistant came in, struggling with a large stack of papers. "No!" Minato mentally shouted. On the outside he made a grim face like he was about to cry and slammed his head on the desk. The sendame was not lying, the paperwork is cursed. Minato finally conceded. His assistant, used to the dramatic sweat, dropped, then sighed, and plopped the papers on his desk. I'll get you some tea, Hokage-sama, she said as if responding to his theatrics. Minato just sighed in acknowledgement, too disappointed to say anything. He'd thank her when she came back. Once she was gone, Minato couldn't help but to think of his son for the millionth time since he left. The clone kept him company, but it just wasn't the same. It had been what? Only 2 days since he left? Man, I really miss him. Naruto come back soon. The young Hokage thought as he looked out the window toward the sky. With Naruto and Jiraiya were running at a light pace, well light for them. They had reached the desert a few hours ago and would reach Suna soon. Jiraiya was itching to ask something, though he had been since his memories returned. He just wanted to phrase it right. Hey Gaki, what did you tell your dad about me? Blunt as the kid beside him, they really were alike. Naruto looked over to him with a dumb expression, then tilted his head like he was thinking. Not much. I told him I trusted you. And that you had trained me. The little blonde answered honestly. Within a second though he got what the old pervert was asking. Did you tell him anything bad I did? And came up with the first thing that came to mind. I didn't tell him you threw me down a bottomless cliff, after having me wear out all my chakra, if that's what you mean. Naruto added with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Jiraiya's jaw dropped. Minato would be pissed if he knew that. Especially since the blonde Hokage seemed even more protective of Naruto than the sennin thought he would be. Why you wouldn't, right? Jiraiya asked a bit fearfully. Naruto outright laughed at his mentor's expression. He really wanted to toy with him some more but took pity on the poor toad sage. Oh, don't worry, I don't intend to rat you out for anything, Naruto told him, rolling his eyes. Jiraiya let out a breath. At least the kid was loyal. But there was something he would have to tell Minato when they got back. He had told Minato that he would tell him about Naruto and what he was hiding, but that meant he would have to tell Minato that he left, leaving the man's son alone. Hey, are you okay? The small boy asked. Naruto thought he might have a heart attack. All he had done was run over and jump, but he felt completely wiped. Like he had been training all day with 1,000 clones or something. He nodded anyway. It was habit. Yeah, I'm fine, Naruto said, trying to slow his breathing. Are you? He asked back. The younger boy nodded back. Good. That was a close one. A new voice spoke. Naruto recognized it. It was a voice from his childhood, his first one more than his second, but he had seen the old man in the Hokage Tower a few times in a new timeline. The Sandaime, Naruto knew, had been watching and saw the folly, but he wouldn't have made it in time. Naruto smiled up at him, and Konohamaru looked up to his grandfather, who offered a hand to help him up. As the smaller boy got up with the offered hand, he grabbed Naruto's hand and pulled him up too. Oh Gigi. This boy saved me. I was falling and then there he was, Konohamaru stated excitedly. Then he turned to Naruto. Thanks for saving me, I'm Konohamaru Sarutobi, the boy said, giving a slight bow. Naruto smiled and nodded back. I'm Naruto Namikaze, the older boy told him, then looked up to the Sandaime. The old man smiled, recognizing the name and the boy. He looked just like his father. Well, thank you Naruto for helping. Konohamaru would have taken a nasty fall if you hadn't, the old man said gratefully. No problem. I was just passing through though, so I gotta get going, Naruto said, starting to walk away. Maybe we'll hang out sometime, Konohamaru, Naruto called back as he started running to check on the rest of his friends before he left. Konohamaru was shocked someone actually used his name. He was the previous Hokage's grandson and was usually called Honorable Grandson or something like that. Hearing his name made him happy, as he smiled and waved back. At the academy. Next, Naruto went to the academy where he knew the rest of his friend would be. They would be in a lecture right about now, so Naruto walked quietly up to the window where he knew the class to be. There he could see everyone. Sasuke was brooding as it seemed Sakura and Ino were fighting over the seat next to him, where Naruto usually sat. Poor Sasuke, Naruto thought, but was still smirking. Shikamaru was staring lazily forward. If he didn't blink every few seconds, Naruto would have sworn he was asleep. Choji was sitting next to him, munching on his seemingly endless supply of potato chips. I mean, really, where does he keep them? Naruto asked himself. Shino was sitting in the back but had glanced at him. One of his bug probably told him I was here, Naruto decided as Kiba pulled him out of his thoughts by turning to smirk at him. And he smelled me. Or Akamaru did. Naruto returned the smirk. Then went back to find the last of the rookie 9. Hinata was wondering what Kiba was looking at and tuned to see her crush outside the window. She blushed when he turned to her and smiled. She had started to like him the moment she first saw him at her 3rd birthday party. Flashbacks, he was so sweet, and when he looked at her, she didn't know how to describe it, but it was like she was the most important thing in the world, precious even. Hinata was young then, though she just wanted to be his friend. She remembered though what happened later that night. A Kumonian tried to kidnap her, but he had saved her, asking her not to tell. Hinata never told, but she did want to ask him about it every time she tried, though he would disappear, change the subject, or something would happen. After a while she forgot to ask, and so she had never found out why or how he had saved her. When Hinata first saw Naruto at the academy though, she remembered he had saved her. So she wanted to know more about him. She was too nervous to ask, so instead she followed him after school. He had run away from his guards just a few blocks from the school, and she had almost lost him. She had to activate her Byakugan to find him. He finally stopped at a training ground. She was already out of breath from following him, but he looked completely fine. She knew then he was strong. What she saw next only affirmed her belief. The boy, who was not that much bigger than her, put his hands in a cross like seal, shouting Kage Bushin Jutsu. All over the field were hundreds of perfect copies of the boy in the center. Hinata reactivated her Byakugan and saw the clones were not just in perfect detail, but they had chakra. They weren't just illusions. They were real. As she was staring, all the clones had started training. They pulled out kunai, and were concentrating. Under her Byakugan she could see the blue chakra so strong growing around the weapons. All the clones threw the kunai. About half of them went up to the hilt in the tree that was their mark. After a few hours the boy in the center fell, breathing hard. Most the clones had dispelled. Hinata had watched him all day. She thought now he would go home, but when the blonde got up he didn't start walking away. He created more clones and they all started over again. Hinata was stunned. She could see he was exhausted, even his chakra was low, but he just kept going. He wouldn't give up. He didn't leave till his father had found him and took him home. She saw it now. This boy was strong, yes, but not just because he was some sort of genius. He had worked for it, all of it. She would always give up, and her father said she was weak. This boy though worked so hard and never gave up, never gave in. She wanted to be like this boy. She admired him. Naruto was standing in front on his father's desk in the Hokage Tower, waiting for an answer. Jiraiya was off to the side leaning on the wall, getting annoyed at his student that was leaving them in suspense. He knew Minato did it on purpose. Naruto was relaxed, though there was no real reason he shouldn't be allowed to go. If he didn't think his father would be able to tell the difference, he would have just left a clone, but he didn't want his dad to worry when he found out, so he had to ask. "What about the academy?" Minato asked. He knew his son would be almost as safe with Jiraiya as in the village, but he still didn't really want to let him go. Naruto looked up and thought for a quick moment, then turned back to his father. "I'll leave one of my new clones, since it won't be running for 2 days straight. It should last about a week. We should be coming back around then." Naruto answered, hoping it wouldn't take too long to find Tsunade, or that Jiraiya knew where she was at this time. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed at the mention of the new clone, but said nothing. Minato didn't notice though and sighed. "All right, you can go, but Jiraiya, take care of him. And bring him back soon," Minato told his sensei as he turned, looking at the old Sennin seriously. Naruto rolled his eyes. He could take care of himself, but he didn't say anything. This promise would make his dad feel better. Jiraiya nodded to him, his smile back in place. "Of course you don't need to worry about the Gaki," Jiraiya said, grinning. "Okay, we leave in an hour. Get your stuff, Naruto," he said, turning to the smaller blonde. Naruto was out the door faster than you can say ramen, which was exactly where he was going. He had to have it one last time before they'd leave. Minato and Jiraiya were left alone in the room. "Well, I should get my stuff too. See you later, Minato," Jiraiya told his student as he headed to the window. Minato looked to him. He trusted his sensei, but he just had to say it one last time. "I mean, Jiraiya, I want him back. In one piece." Minato spoke in a totally serious voice, but Jiraiya knew what he needed. He had known the Hokage since he was a genin. Jiraiya turned back to the young Kage, and smirked. "I know, don't worry. I will bring him back, I promise," Jiraiya said, giving a slight nod at the end. "Besides, if there is one thing you can count on, is that no matter what crazy or impossible thing that kid gets himself into, he always finds a way through it." Jiraiya was about to jump out the window when Minato spoke again. "You knew him, from the other time world or whatever. When you get back, will you tell me about him? He has told me some things, but sometimes it feels like he's trying to keep something from me." Minato looked hopeful at his sensei. Jiraiya's eyes glazed over. He knew some of the things Naruto probably wasn't talking about. "I will tell you. But know that if I'm right about what he's hiding, it isn't because he doesn't trust you. It's most likely because he doesn't want you to know the consequences." With that, Jiraiya left. Minato wasn't so sure he wanted to know anymore, but now he knew he had to. With Naruto halfway to Ikiraku's, Naruto remembered he only had an hour to pack, so he sent out a clone to do that. Now he could still eat and check up on everyone before he had to leave. After he had spent about half an hour at Ikiraku's and ate about 10 bowls of his favorite meal, Naruto ran out to find Konohamaru. Little Konohamaru was only 4, and didn't know him yet, but Naruto would look for him every now and then just to make sure he was okay. Naruto found him at the playground with the Sandaime, his grandfather, watching over him. The small boy was trying to climb on the money bars. He was just barely able to reach up and grab the first one. He looked kind of scared, but the small brown-haired boy pushed off and swung to the next one, catching it. Naruto saw Konohamaru smile as he caught the bar and was just about to walk away when he saw his young friend try for the next one. His fingers barely touched the bar and slipped off, but Konohamaru had already let go on the last one and was falling. Of course he couldn't just fall right, he was going to land right on his head. Damn it! Naruto cursed. I was trying not to meet him for a few more years, so not too much would change, but if he lands on his head he could get head trauma, memories loss, hell, he could go into a coma, or die. Naruto didn't need to think about it. His chakra surged into his legs and feet as he had already started running, but he was too far, he wasn't going to make it. But I have to. Konohamaru could die. In that moment time slowed, and then everything was just stopped. Nothing was moving, not even Naruto, but he could see. Everything looked kind of grayish blue except the boy in his sights halfway to the ground. He looked kind of yellow. He didn't know if he could move like this or if time would restart if he tried. If he was going to save his friend, he had to think. He was too far away to just run to him. He would have to jump, but he would have to do it perfectly to get under Konohamaru and break the fall. Alright, he was ready after a moment of thinking. I know what to do now. I need everything to start moving. Naruto tried to go forward with his plan. He started moving, but he was going so fast he didn't know if everything else was or not. Pushing as much chakra into his leg and feet as he could at once, Naruto jumped for Konohamaru, who was just a foot from the ground. Naruto spun himself in mid-jump so that he would be on the bottom. His front hit the smaller boy's side and Naruto grabbed him, holding him close to protect him. They hit the ground with Konohamaru on top of Naruto. The little Konohamaru didn't know what happened. 1 second he was falling and the next he was here. He didn't feel hurt, but there was something under him. Something breathing. Konohamaru pushed himself up to see a blonde boy a little older than him breathing heavily under him. Konohamaru rolled off him. Hi. Naruto agreed, walking over and pulling out a diagram, the seal, so that Jiraiya could look it over. Another seal master to check over his work never hurt. Within 5 minutes they were both out the door. Keeping to the shadows and coving themselves in a light jutsu that helped them stay hidden, Jiraiya often used it to infiltrate villages to get information. When they arrived at Gaara's house, Naruto led Jiraiya around to where Gaara's window was, then motioned for him to stay there as the little blonde jumped up to his friend's window, sliding it open and silently slipping in. Gaara was laying down on his stomach coloring when out of nowhere he felt someone touch him. He jumped and his sand moved on instinct in between him and the person. He realized that even though the sand was covering this person, they hadn't moved their hand off his shoulder. Matter of fact, he didn't even think they flinched. Gaara lowered the sand to see who it was and instantly relaxed. Hey Gaara. Naruto chirped quietly, like he hadn't just scared his friend half to death. Though he was grinning. And seemed quite pleased with himself too. Gaara blinked, confused and a bit annoyed that he had been frightened. Hi, what are you doing here? Gaara asked quietly so that no one in the house would know anything was going on. Naruto smiled at him. It's time. I am going to fix your seal. But we have to do it out of the village so no one sees us. At where we normally play should be good. Naruto said, turning around and walking toward the window. He put one foot on the windowsill and turned back to Gaara. Come on. Naruto whispered excitedly, waving his hand for Gaara to follow him. Gaara didn't need to be told twice as he almost ran after Naruto, jumping out the window with him. Jiraiya waited on the ground for the two boys, and just as he was getting bored, two Shibas jumped out the second-story window his apprentice had just gone into. At first thought it was good, then he noticed that the little blurs of red and yellow were going to land right on top of him. The first was Naruto, of course. He hit Jiraiya right in the chest, and before the Sennin could get his balance back, the red blur crashed into him and he fell over. Jiraiya landed on his back and groaned as he noticed Naruto chuckling. The little brat did it on purpose. Jiraiya thought as he glared at the chibi. Of course when Naruto saw this he just looked back innocently blinking his big blue eyes. Jiraiya just rolled his eyes and got up pushing the boys off.